finally got your first leadership gig, loving the new role, but feeling the pressure of your new responsibilities and all that expectation to perform? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Crossing the chasm from a technical role to leadership, from doing stuff to managing and leading people is the toughest challenge any leader must make. Welcome to the Human Edge Show, the podcast dedicated to help you do just that, successfully cross the doing to leading chasm. Campbell Such here, Chief Chasm Crossing Guide. I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I want to help you learn those lessons much more easily by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have already figured it out. You'll get great actionable tips, strategies, and techniques to make the transition so much easier and faster for you. Now let's get to it. Welcome to another episode of the Human Edge Show. I'm privileged to have Angela Nash from New Zealand Rugby on the show today. Angela, welcome. It's great to have you on the show.
Hey, Campbell, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Angela is Chief Information and Technology Officer at New Zealand Rugby. Angela is a career IT professional with a broad history across many industries, including telecommunications, technology, consulting, and, of course, sports. She has a particular interest in people management and innovative technologies. And Angela is an accredited business mentor, executive, and director who speaks regularly at industry events on managing in times of change. And there's a lot of change going on right now with COVID and everything else that's going on in the world. Technical disruption, diversity, and women in IT. Great to have you on the show, Angela. How about telling us something that not many people would know about you?
So funnily enough, I had this chat with my staff this morning because there's lots of things that people don't know about me that are probably a bit weird, but we kind of came up with two, so I'm going to give you two. One is the other day I brought my first e-motorbike, and it was the first one to get registered in this country of that particular type, so that took quite a long time to get it through registration and road compliance and stuff like that. And it looks like a mini chopper. Very, very cool. And the other thing, which everyone at work wants to ride, by the way, so I'm going to have to bring it in one day. And the other thing is I like to paint. So when I can't get to the gym and or go for a run and stuff like that, I do paintings. So that's probably something not many people know.
Is there, and what medium do you use with painting?
So the most recent one I did was in a very, very large, as in very, very large, acrylic of the Silver Surfer. Which now hangs pride of place in our lounge. I don't know if the rest of my family likes it as much as I do, but I do.
Well, I have a bit of an affinity with surfing. Was there any particular reason you chose the Silver Surfer?
No, I've been a comic fan my whole life, so I'm very pleased that they're back in fashion at the moment, but it's just he's my favourite character. And we had a big blank wall in the lounge, and I thought I'm going to fill that with my favourite thing, and so I did.
Awesome. Hey, that's really cool. That's great to know. Thank you for sharing that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's okay.
So just to kind of start off, if you can cast your mind back to the early days of your leadership journey, can you just talk to us a little bit about what was the initiator of that? Like what were those first steps, and how did you feel? And what were some of the things that you learned, and maybe some of the mistakes that you made that you might do different, things that you might do differently if you had your time all over again doing that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I certainly started leadership quite young. I had a couple of employees sort of in my early 20s. And then in my late 20s, after the conversation with the manager post a restructure, I inherited over 200 people, at probably around 26, 27, which is pretty young to be running a team of that size. And he obviously thought I could do it. And he kind of positioned it to me with, hey, so you up for this? And I went, yeah, without any thought whatsoever as to what I was taking on board. I think, I think two parts to my answer really is one, when opportunities are put in front of you, and particularly for me, I've always just taken them. Not necessarily always been the right thing, but you certainly learn where you should tread and where you shouldn't, I think, by doing that. One thing I would do differently, and it was management by fire, really, is, I'm quite blunt, and people, and not necessarily in a bad way, but one of my colleagues says I speak with great clarity, which I think is a euphemistic way of saying I'm blunt. But one thing I probably have found I would definitely do differently is moderating what I say to the audience. And so not just going, here's some information that I think you should know and have at it, but actually really thinking about what's my intention with that information and who's listening to it and what am I expecting them to do with it. So it's not just a free flow, here's Angela's opinion and you should all listen to it and do what I expect you to do with it, but actually really thinking about why am I giving this information, and it's also that sort of, is this useful to them and can I do anything with this, or is it just destructive information or unhelpful information or pessimistic information or whatever that the case may be. And so I think over time I've learned that's probably been my biggest lesson, is that there's that communication. If it's unhelpful, don't say it. If it's not constructive, don't share it. If there's nothing anybody can do with it, then they don't need to have it. And really just really think about that, because when you're someone who moves at quite a pace, which I do, and speak with great clarity, sometimes you're just being unhelpful by sharing your thoughts. And so I think that's probably my biggest learning around management, is actually you don't want to be that seagull manager. You don't want to be the person that just kind of swips in and swips out again. And actually, you're there and people need you and listen to you and seeking help and guidance and advice. And so you should be really take that responsibility really seriously.
Wow. In that first role, because that's a massive step up from managing a couple of people to going to 200, was there a particular event that happened that got you into managing a couple of people right at the start, or did that just kind of evolve?
Yeah, it kind of evolved. I mean, it's sort of once you've, I my first role was an analyst programmer fresh out of university, and then I sort of got into BA and then a bit of testing and then back into development. And, and I sort of, once you've sort of been there 3 or 4 or 5 years, then you're the most senior nerd on the floor. And then if a new person comes in, then they sit under you, and so, I learned a lot by working my way up through the ranks. And then you kind of have an affinity with someone who comes in and they're where you were 2 years ago. And so you kind of, it's almost that sort of team management, we're all in this together. But then when you get given a bigger group, you can't act like that. And so that difference between team leader and manager and leader, is quite a leap. And so it evolved over time, and then eventually got to the point where I had opportunities in front of me that meant I had to start thinking not just as colleague or leader, or I'm the more senior of the two of us, but actually what does management mean? What does leadership mean? What are people needing from me? Which is a real difference from being the person that writes the code to being the person that sets the strategy for the entire business around what code you need. So, that was a real conscious step for me. I found it quite hard to get my fingers out of the pies and actually put my head in the game as opposed to my fingers in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real challenge for anyone coming up through a technical path to put the tools down. And interesting, I interviewed Daya Sivakumar from AMP, and he had a CEO that took he grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and said, "You take that screwdriver out of your hand, and you're going to, all your admin privileges are gone." So it meant that he couldn't get his hands in the pie anymore, and that's a real challenge for a lot of people, and it's hard to step away, right? It
was very difficult, and it was a real conscious thing that I go, I know how to do it, but I'm not doing it. You have to do it, and there's that real acceptance that you are not. I don't have a cape. I'm not the single most important person on the planet. And so just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. And just because I'm capable of something doesn't mean that somebody else is not. And so it was a real conscious sort of, actually, you know what? If somebody hadn't stepped back and let me step up, then I never would have learned anything either. And so, that real conscious, actually, I'm surrounded by really, really smart people, and they might take 2 days to do something that'd take me half an hour. That's okay, because next time they do it, it'll take them a day, and the next time they do it, it'll take them half a day, and the next time they do it, they'll be where I'm at. We're all good. Then there's 2 of us, And so it was that real conscious thought of building a sort of environment around me and teams around me of people that could do what I do because I let them, or I enabled them to do things and not just keep doing it myself, because it's a spiral that's very difficult to get out of.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I like your word enablement too. We often use the word empowerment, which I really struggle with the word. I mean, it's valid, but that enabling people and supporting them to do it, and recognizing that if you continue to do it, then you can't multiply yourself, and where you can add the real value isn't going to happen. So I think it's really interesting for me that you had those thoughts. Was that as a result of that big role that you got offered? Because I mean, going to 200 people, that's a massive step, and there's got to be layers in there because you can't have 200 people reporting to you. So you went from managing a small team to suddenly managing leaders of presumably, because I don't know exactly what it looked like, but can you just talk me a little bit through that? Because that's a big change for a leader and a manager to make, and I'm sure there's some great insight that you found, and obviously you're reflective as well and learned a whole bunch by thinking about things.
Yeah, and I think I had some really good support systems around me, and some people who I still seek out guidance and advice from now, who gave me some pretty blunt but very, very helpful advice, which was you don't have to do
very
this.
Clear advice, right?
Very clear, clarity.
Yeah.
That you don't very pragmatic as well. We don't expect you to know everything. We don't expect you to do everything. We expect you to trip and fall over and stumble before you run with this role, and that's okay. And so I think getting that permission for all of those things almost on day one meant that I didn't feel this overwhelming sense of pressure to be awesome at a job that I'd never done before. And I have a very honest style with my team, and so I kind of went into it going, shit, this is a bit of a big ask, and I know it will be, but I think I know what I'm doing, and I know I can do this. So if I'm not giving you something that you need, or I've said something that's not helpful, or something, feel free to give me that feedback, because you're going to get it from me, and I need it back the other way, because otherwise it's going to be Ange telling you what to do, which is not the right way to run a team. And so, and I had some really, really, really good supportive staff members who were just so free with their feedback, positive and negative, that we created a real culture of openness, and that you could talk about stuff. And if something wasn't working, we'd talk about it, and it was okay. And so almost that fail fast mindset before it was cool. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not get it right, and not kick ourselves about it. And so we had quite a really nice culture within our team that actually, and for some people, I was significantly younger than some of the people that I was leading, and significantly less experienced. But that's okay, because I wasn't there to do their job. I was here to make sure that we all could do our jobs together. And so, so I had a lot of really good support and some really honest people in my team that helped me go in the right direction.
Yeah, which is brilliant, right? So
yeah.
And great that you had people around you. And would that have also included the person that you reported to, the person that put you in that role, or the people in more senior roles that then kind of made that clear that was important, that you understood that they're not expecting from day one that you have to be able to succeed and do everything right, not make any mistakes, and hey, that it was actually okay, and that you could go to them as well?
Absolutely.
New leaders end up in a situation where they feel like they have to know it all on day one. The whole imposter syndrome thing kicks in. I can't talk to anyone. I've certainly been there before, because you don't want to feel like you're failing, or that that you just don't know stuff. So that's really powerful. I'm really pleased to hear that, because that's not the path for a lot of leaders.
No, and it's not. And certainly, and one thing that's really impacted me is I've said this in other sort of similar conversations, is I was very lucky to grow up in a household where my father never told me I couldn't do anything. So, if he needed someone to carry a 20 kg sack of cement because he was laying a new footpath to the garden, then I was expected to go pick up that 20 kg sack of cement, girl or no girl, because you're capable of it. So, go do it, or can you go saw this bit of wood, or help me nail this thing, or we're going to the dump, you can come down and help me, or actually I quite like computers, Dad, we'll go do it, And so, I was never told that I couldn't do something because I was a girl. I was never told I couldn't do something because why would you want to do that? It was just, hey, I quite like doing this. Can I have a go at that? And there was always have at it. Why not? And so I think I was incredibly lucky to grow up in a household where I never thought, I was never restricted by gender or by, I liked sciencey things. I was coding computers on Dad's Commodore 64 at 14, because I liked it. And so when I got to high school, I took more papers, and when I got to university, I did the things that I liked doing because nobody told me that I shouldn't or couldn't. And so then when I got to my first job, I didn't think anything of doing stuff that, was an untraditional role. And so, I think I feel incredibly lucky that I was brought up with that mentality that the only person stopping me from doing something's me, right? Which I know in practice is not true, because there's plenty of people trying to stop you doing things. But actually, that mindset of give it a go and why not, and then to have a, and don't get me wrong, I work hard. I've worked very, very hard to get where I am, but be surrounded by people or have that one manager that put that trust in me and that faith, very lucky. And I think that the best thing I could ever have done with that was recognize how lucky I was, and then make sure that now I'm a manager of other people or a leader of other people to give them that same support and encouragement and sense of self to say, I don't expect you're going to fall over. That's fine. We've all been there. That's okay. Pick yourself up. What happens is when you pick yourself up and what you do next is what I'm interested in, not the fact that you've fallen over. And so I think, I've been very lucky, but also had the nous to actually recognise that luck and do something with it.
Yeah. That's and that's great that it's the next thing that's the important thing, because we all fall and stumble, right? And if we make a mistake, which we all do, and that experience is about making mistakes and learning from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you do with a new leader that you've appointed into a role, perhaps from a technical, who's done the technical thing and have become very accomplished in a technical role with a really good technical toolbox, and now they've got to go across that big chasm, which is going to being, here's how I always get stuff done, to, well, through leadership and management, it's a whole different another whole toolbox with a set of tools in it.
Yeah.
And their tendency is, all of our tendency is to, what you talked about before, which is if you do it yourself, you'll get it done more quickly, but you've got to let go and recognize that other people need to do it. Have you found any really good ways of encouraging people to let go and give other people a chance to do it and be comfortable with making a mistake when they're technically looking at it going, I could do it so much better and easier and quicker?
Yeah, and it's quite funny because I talk about nerds with social skills and managing technical people is quite different to managing non-technical people, for lots of different reasons. Some of it cliche, but some of it absolutely true. And so I think for me, things I've found really successful in the past is actually taking them away, like you say, remove someone's admin access, take the toolbox out of their hand and give them something else to do for a month, 2 months, so they don't have a choice. And it's like you breaking a habit. So even now I find myself crawling under desks, plugging in fibre optic cable. And, and I know it's not a good use of my time, but sometimes it's just quicker for me to do it. But it's actually breaking that habit, so that's not your default position on everything. Yeah. So you make a conscious choice of, actually, this is literally a 2-minute job and I know 50 other people could do it, but I'm here and I'm just going to do it. Or actually, this is a bit more important and this is an opportunity for somebody else to pick something up. And so, you hear people talk about when you're at this point of the ladder, you turn around and you put the ladder back down for the people below you. And I think, actually talking like that to new leaders and saying, you've got here and the people below you need to know that they can get to where you are. And the only way they're going to do that is by you giving the opportunities that you've had, and really actually just thinking about how you got to where you are and, giving back, being a good human, like handing things back to where, if you wouldn't be where you are, someone didn't hand it to you. So, hand it back. And so that real thinking of, you're not going to be where you are forever and someone needs to come and be you in 5 years. So build people around you who can come and be you, because it makes you look awesome as well. If you leave a company and you leave this amazingly skilled, happy, vibrant, performing team behind you, how cool is that? And it's like, if somebody wants to go and try working in another company, go with your blessing and all the support and training and love and comfort, everything you can give them to go and be successful somewhere else, because they're going to talk about you in that other company. And so, I think really just thinking about the world like that, leave it better than how you found it. Leave your team in a better position than how you inherited them. Make sure people leave with your blessing, feeling like you've done everything you can to support them to go where they need to be next. And I think I talk with my team about that. And when I put a new leader in a position, I talk to them in that way and go, not everyone's going to think like me, and that's okay. Because if the whole world was like me, imagine how awful that would be. But, if you think about that as your starting position and then find what works for you from a support perspective, then you'll always be going at least in the right direction. So I think it's, and, not everyone's comfortable having conversations like that and having open conversations and things like that, but you don't have to sort of lay it all at the table on day one, you can actually sort of go, and how did you find that conversation, and what bit of that was hard? And, if someone's going through their first performance management process, which we all know is incredibly stressful, give them support on particular bits that they find difficult, and really just try and know your leaders and know your managers, because they need your help and they need your support, not just oh, well, have at it. Here's 10 people, good luck. So really consciously thinking about what you're putting in place.
Yeah, and with your leaders and other people directly in your team, even if they're not leaders themselves, is enabling them. Love the word, and then which means authority and accountability, but also support when they need it, and an open, for want of a better term, an open door to come and talk to you with a knowledge that hey, you can help them see what the answer might be for themselves, or at the very least give them an answer if they need it.
Yeah, and I think creating that culture where actually it's okay to have a hard conversation and there's no punishment for it, because I think if someone has a hard conversation and then there's some sort of return loop that says, oh, I'm going to go yell at so-and-so, then they're not going to have the second one, so really just sort of actually if you are genuinely honest, you got to walk that talk,
Yeah, no one likes to have. I haven't met too many people that like to have hard conversations and difficult conversations, but they're actually super important to have, right? And because otherwise, all that happens is the underlying emotion or the human need, still sits there simmering away, and eventually it's going to go bad. And you might lose one of your star players, or you might lose someone, or they might disrupt, or anything can happen that can be. Really good. So how do you go into it? And how do you go into a difficult conversation? Do you have an approach?
I used to just go in them, completely unstructured, no thought whatsoever, just like, right, I've got to go and have a hard conversation, and stomp off I went, and which is great. And, you get generally get the desired outcome, but probably burn bridges on your way through, right? Which is not really a great way to behave. And so I learned that very early on, that, whilst I might get the outcome, I probably wasn't doing it. Blunt force trauma is how I tend to think of those conversations, and they're not actually that much fun for anyone. So now I do consciously think about it, and I think really about what am I trying to achieve here? Is it do I really need someone to see that they're not doing something, or do I really need someone to understand that what they've done is not right, or do they need some support or whatever? And really think about what outcome I'm aiming for before I walk in a room. And then the other thing I always remind myself, and again, I'm not sure everyone does this, but it's something I consciously do, is don't forget that work is this much of someone's day. And you don't know what happened before they got to work. They might have crashed their car, or their child might be sick, or Nana's just died, or they've got bills to pay that they can't afford, or whatever the case may be. You don't have any knowledge of what their day's been like before they got to work. And then they're at work, and then when they leave, you have no knowledge of what's going on in their life outside of work. And you might be getting someone who hasn't slept, they're stressed out of their mind, they've got dramas and problems that you can't possibly fathom. And then they come into work and you're having a go at them about not delivering a report that was due on Tuesday at 3:00. And then when they leave, they've got to go home and deal with a whole bunch of other stuff. And in that context, what you care about isn't even a blip on their radar. And so I really sort of think, if someone's performance isn't where I need it to be, or their behaviour is unusual, or something's going on that just makes me not happy, or someone else is not happy, or whatever the case may be, to check in with the bit before and after work, before I start having a go at work. And it's just, again, that sort of being a good human being. Actually, I might be your boss and I might be needing some output from you, but actually, are you okay? Because I'm seeing some things that make me think that maybe you're not, and give them that opportunity to talk about it. And often you'll get someone going, oh shit, I'm so sorry, this is what's happened, and I'm sorry I didn't come talk to you, I didn't tell you, but I just had and then you go, okay, well then we're not going to talk about this bit, let's talk about what we can do to get you to where you need to be, mental health or family health or whatever the case may be, and actually deal with the cause, not the symptom of it. And so I've found that has been the single biggest change in my management style over the last sort of 10 years. That's just been so helpful. I'm sure not just for me, but for my staff as well, that you're not having a go at this. You're actually going, how did you get to this point? And I find that creates such a nicer environment for people to actually talk about why things aren't working for them.
Yeah.
And then you've got a door to help. And so I think that for me is, before I've even walked in the door, I've thought about all these things, and one of the first things I'll ask is, are you okay? What's up with you? I'm not saying things that make me think that you're okay. And if they go, no, I'm all good, then you have the conversation around, okay, if you're all good, then let's have a chat about this. But I think, you need to remember that that you're dealing with human beings, and work's only this much of their life. And so, if you're not thinking about the other bits and not interfering, absolutely not interfering, but if you're not thinking about the other bits, you haven't got a shit show in managing the bits when they're at work.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. There's an analogy around how big a part our underlying emotions play in our lives, which is the kind of the elephant in the rider, and the conscious piece is the rider on top. And perhaps that's sort of similar analogy to what we're talking about here, is the bit that you see at work might be the rider on top, but if the elephant's going in the other direction, driven by emotion because of family or whatever else is going on in their life, then you're really going to struggle to get the elephant going in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
And do you? So that's really interesting, because to me that's awesome, and I found that really powerful as well, as building that connection with people in the team and people around you, not necessarily just in your team. Mm-hmm. Do you tend to have those conversations and ask those questions just when there's something that's not working, or is it broader than that, and it sort of builds around a broader engagement with the team?
Yeah, and I think it's almost like a habit that I take being a leader really seriously, and I probably haven't always done that, but I think now I do. And that building that rapport with your team and actually asking those questions exactly when it's not expected of you to ask, I think is the most important thing, because it's not she's checking a box at our quarterly update and how are you going? Yeah, good, great, I've checked the box and we're off. And actually getting to know my team. And, when you have large teams, you can't possibly get to know everybody, but they can get to know you. So when you walk into a room, everyone knows, hey, how are you, Manj? How are you? And my 200 people or 500 people or whatever it is all know me. I can't possibly know all of them. But if I let them know me, then you feel a bit more engaged. And when somebody wants to come talk to me, they feel like they know me enough to come and have that chat. And so, again, I talk about my dog and my kids, and I'm doing this. And not because not everybody wants to be, fully intimated into my life or know at all what my social calendar is. So I'm very mindful about that. But actually, also, I'm a human being. And, this morning I backed the car into the bloody fence, and then the dog ran away and barked at the neighbour, and then the tree fell over. And then I came in and I sat in traffic for an hour and a half, and now I'm in here talking to you. So imagine how I feel, And so actually just remember, not only are you managing humans, but you're human too. And so I try and make sure that, and it's a delicate balance, because you don't want to overshare, because not everyone's interested in my life, but also want people to know that actually there is a human being on this side too. And so I kind of consciously think about those things. But yeah, it's a hard one, and it depends on the culture of your team, depends what company you're in, it depends, what sort of, and I tend to think about, like my immediate peer group as well is vitally important. So, I talk often about, looking around you and saying, on the days where you're up here and your colleagues down here, dip down and give them some help. Because on the day that you're down here and they're up there, you want them to turn around and dip down and give you some help as well. And so really just talk openly about it, walk in and go, I have had an absolute nightmare of a morning. Give me 5 minutes and I'll come back and talk to you. Just be honest. Don't be an idiot about it, but, just sort of say to someone, just give me 5 minutes, so that you don't walk in and you're huffy, puffy, and they don't know why.
Yeah. 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 And that's with your peers as well, but also with the team, because they're always looking for you for clues and cues. Mm-hmm. And, as a leader, if you don't recognize that everything that you do is, for want of a better term, analysed and assessed, and they're looking for meaning, and often the meaning may not be what you intend. So it's very important that you think about that.
Be conscious about what comes out here, I think, and even body language. When you're talking to someone, we laugh a lot with my team, and I go, oh, you're under the mistaken impression I read things and actually listen, because I move at such a pace that it seems like I'm not taking it in, but I actually am. So it's been something that I've learned over the years, that I actually have to stop and face and listen, because if I'm not, people assume I'm not listening when actually I am. And so, and I think there's visual clues and stuff that you as a person need to realize how other people see you. And then that's been another good learning of, and I've had some really, really robust feedback from people in the past about, Andrew, when you said that was a bit rough. And you're like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Not meaning anything by it's not the point. It's what somebody else takes from it or how it comes across. And so being really mindful, and this is why I say earlier, I take leadership really seriously, is actually being really mindful that I can really upset someone's day with an off-the-cuff comment that meant nothing to me, but can really, really derail someone else's day, and be really thoughtful about what comes out your mouth.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder of the way communication works, right? And it's that whole intent thing. We know what we intend, but the only thing that other people can pick up is what they observe. And so you might have intended as an off-the-cuff remark, but your face had instead of having a piss-take look on your face, you had a slightly grumpy look on your face, which and they took it all the wrong way, and suddenly their days. So that's and so being open to be able to get that feedback. Hey, Ange, that didn't come across very well. Would be great.
Yeah.
Just stepping out, or maybe up a level, if you like, or to a higher level, in terms of leaders. So one of the biggest challenges that we have as a new leader is we get put into a new role, and we're going from this knowing stuff around doing stuff and to not knowing much stuff about how to lead and manage people. Mm-hmm. What's been your experience, or is there any advice you can give to people, to leaders who are putting new leaders into a role, someone that's just appointed a new leader into a role, probably out of a technical role, because that's sort of the area we're talking about. What can they do to make sure that that person they've appointed into the role has the best chance of starting fast and succeeding over the long term?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably supplementary to that question that we were talking about earlier, is I think actually almost force them into a position where they either physically are unable to dip down too far, or actually have that conversation and go, you need to be mindful of letting your team do their job. And that's not your job anymore. This is your job now. That's not your job. This is your job. And really just checking in to make sure, until that habit's broken, that they're actually doing that. I think, depending upon the person, and some people are willing to just jump in, and that's great. Support that and give them that support. And others really feel like they need training or regular check-ins. It's a bit like when you do your end-of-year reviews. Some people are like, I'm happy with a 4-minute conversation, call it good, we're all good to go. And other people write you a 15-page document explaining all the things that they did that year. And neither of those are wrong. It's what that individual requires. Some people require regular positive feedback. Some people don't want to talk about it because it's awkward. And you've got to figure out what leader that is and what their leadership style is. And if you're going to be someone who grows good leaders, that's the first thing you can do. Is, I know what my leadership style is, but it might not be yours. And in fact, it almost certainly won't be yours. So work out what, make sure that you don't try and enforce your leadership style and processes on somebody else, because it just won't work. It's like, I don't know if you've ever gone and talked at a conference or something. Nobody else can write what I'm going to say, because it just won't sound authentic. It'll sound like I'm reading a script. Whereas if I write it, it sounds real and it's engaging, because I'm talking about how things I talk about. And so it's the same with leadership. You can't enforce your style on someone else. So you've got to work out what will help them define what their leadership style is, where their comfort zones are, where they struggle, and work with them on an individual basis. It's a bit like culture. You can't print it out and pin it on a wall and go, there we are. Just same with leadership. You can't do the same thing. So for me, that would be the biggest piece of advice for new leaders, or someone putting new leaders in, is be mindful of yourself. Don't enforce your way of doing things on them, because it should be different. There's a reason diversity is such a big thing. And really just work with them to help them find their style. If they already know their style, work with them to figure out beefing up the bits they're already good at. Don't ignore the bits someone's good at, make them even better. And the bits that they're not so good at, give them some support and help.
Yep. Okay, that's brilliant. The other thing I was just thinking about while you were talking was in a leadership role, when you've got a team and you're managing a team directly getting stuff done, that's a whole lot different to someone who's leading a team of leaders to get stuff done. And that step up, not only is the transition from a technical role into a leadership role big, the next big step you take is the one where you go from being a leader to being a leader of leaders. Is there any thoughts you've got around that might be useful for someone that may have been leading a team and has now been promoted into a role where they're leading other leaders and they've not had any experience with that before?
Yeah, and again, sort of when I found myself in that position, you kind of muddle along acting the same way you did in the previous role until you suddenly realise, actually, shit, that's not working. Why is it not working? Oh, because it's a different job, And so actually stopping and going, actually, what am I here to do? Okay, I'm here to manage managers. You're not doing that anymore. You're here to lead leaders, or you're here to manage leaders, and really think about, again, what the outcome of the role, what's the purpose, why are you there? I'm not there to do their job. I'm not there to set their strategy. I'm not there to hold their hand, because if you're a leader, you're there for a reason. But you're there to inspire. You're there to enable. You're there to, give support when they need it. You're there to course correct if that's required. You're there to provide guidance and all those good things, and create an environment where they can just succeed or feel enabled to go and do what they feel like they need to do. I'm one of those sorts of, I talk about, there's two sorts of people, and this is very simplistic, so excuse me, that you have people that you can wind up, point, and just let them go, and they'll come and check back in when they need you, or they'll put their hand up and you go and check in them. And there's others that need a to-do list. And you're the first thing, and often to-do list people don't end up being leaders, and that's actually okay. And so the first thing you need to work out is this someone who needs a bit more of a to-do list, or is this someone that I can just go, vague guidance over here, off you go. Let's see what you come back with. And actually, both of those things are perfectly okay. And you need people like both of those sorts of people in your team. And so for me, I think it really is just again, recognizing the role you're there to play, and being mindful of not enforcing your belief system or your process on others, because actually they're leaders themselves and they need to be able to make their own calls. If you're surrounded by a bunch of really smart people, let them be smart. If you're surrounded by a bunch of people who know what they're doing, let them go do what they're doing, without trying to enforce yourself on others, I guess. There's no eloquent way of saying that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's imposing your style, imposing your Angela, that's been absolutely amazing. Great chat. We talked about all sorts of things. Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I haven't, or any sort of, before we wrap up, any other words?
Let me have a quick look at your list. I think one thing that really sort of reached out, and we haven't really talked about it, but sort of we did talk about briefly about the common pitfalls and things like that. And I think one of the things, or a piece of advice, or one of the things that I think people need to remember is you don't have to work for jerks. And I don't know if that's helpful at all, but it took me a long time to realize that just because someone's my manager does not mean that they know everything. And just because someone's my manager or my leader or my senior exec or whatever, and they make me feel a certain way, or they treat me in a way that I don't like, actually there's other jobs. And it took me a long time, and working for some real people that, now as a manager, I'm like, wow, how did they get away with that? But I think it took me a long time to actually remember that you need to have self-respect at work as well. And as a manager, there's no bigger lesson for me than actually I hated working for someone who was like that, and I'm never going to be like that. And actually, we talk often about a bus. So you're on the bus, you're off the bus, or you're in front of the bus, and you need to really think about where you fit in that workspace. And that if you have a manager who's constantly putting you in front of the bus, get off it. So I think that's something that as a leader, because people put you in positions that you may or may not be ready for, you may or may not be suited for, you may or may not get the support that you need. And if you're being put in a position that you thought was something and then your manager just deserts you, or your leader doesn't lead you, then don't hang in there waiting for something to change. Go and find a manager that wants you there. Yeah. So it took me a long time to realise that.
That's a brilliant lesson. And one of the things that I've learned is that almost more important than anything else is who you report to. Because if they're causing, if you just look at the negative side of it, if your day is always under stress or stressed because of their style and the way things are working, and it's not for you, which they may be fine for someone else, but if it's not for you, you're going to struggle. You're not going to enjoy your role, and then that spills out into the rest of your life. And recognize it, and what I'm hearing from you is do it sooner rather than later.
You don't beat yourself up because of someone else. Yeah,
that's right. There was one other thing that you mentioned just before. I'll just quickly ask you before we wrap up, which was one of the biggest challenges around leadership is that if you look at the stats, and Gallup have done a lot of research on this, there's not, it's only a small percentage of people that make really good leaders naturally. 1 in 10, another 2 in 10 with the right coaching and mentoring and training and help and support can be good leaders. The other 7 out of 10, based on their research, and it's global, are probably best to continue with their technical path or whatever else they do. And that's in no way denigrating that, because that's critical. But how do you work out as a leader, looking at your team, who might be best suited to each of those roles? And I think you hinted at it before.
Needs for social skills.
You wind up and off they go, and others you have to give the to-do list to. Is that something that you might? I'm fascinated by this because I think it's a critical thing in getting the right people into leadership roles.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's so important in technical roles when you're in a technical company or even technical team, or you're leading a bunch of technicians, is some people are unbelievably technically competent and are at the peak of their technical game, should never ever manage people. And there's also people leaders who should never ever be given a screwdriver, right? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I think for me, one of the, not try and force someone into a leadership role if they show real discomfort with it, and just ask, do you have any ambitions to manage staff? And I can tell you, every time I've asked that question to someone who has none, they'll go, no. You go, okay, we won't put you on this path then, and that's actually okay. There's nothing wrong with having a team of massive nerds who just want to sit in the corner and do stuff. That's why they're good at what they do. But I've said it a couple of times now, nerds with social skills. When you find a nerd who's technically very competent, but is capable of going and explaining technical concepts to the marketing department or to senior leadership or to customers or whatever, and able to dip in and out of those two environments, that to me signals someone who's probably got either management or leadership capabilities there in some form. It might not be people management, but it could be strategic management. It could be actually thinking about those concepts, because it's quite difficult to explain some of these technical things to people. And if you're able to almost be a translator between that and that in itself for me is step one. And then you will either go into strategy and maybe not people management, or you'll go, actually, I can manage the nerds and I can explain to the people what they do all day. What a great skill that is, So I think recognizing that it's actually okay to have nerds that will never manage people, and that's okay. And I'm sure that's not the only pathway.
Yeah, that's right. And many companies don't make that pathway available because the way to get more money and be recognised and have all of those things is to go into leadership. And actually, often if it's someone that shouldn't be in a leadership role and they love what they do, they're going to struggle to succeed. They're going to hate what they're doing. They're going to wish they were back on the teams, all of that stuff, right? And so and then what happens is they get massively stressed. And they leave. And you just lost one of your star players, right? So that's wrong all the way around, right? For them and for you. Yeah. Angela, that's been absolutely outstanding. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and having you on the show today. Look forward to perhaps getting you back again sometime to have another chat.
More than welcome, Campbell. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you have a friend or a colleague who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. If you have a friend or a colleague who would not benefit, but you haven't been in touch with them for a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and to help me create the show that's most useful for you. And if you're frustrated or having challenges or would like some help, guidance, assistance with your first leadership role, then check out integrationcatalyst.com in the link in the podcast notes below. Or pass this on to your boss to nudge them to get you the help you really need to cross the doing to managing chasm and get you powered up on your leadership and management journey. And if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, hit subscribe. Until next time.